Good afternoon. Welcome to the StatsCan production update with Janelle and Harvey. We had a couple big things happening in the markets the last few days, so thought we should do a quick video to go over them. Let's start with canola here. We had a really good day with canola. Really liking the action we've seen. Starting to see a little more support from the bloodbath we've seen. Anything in particular on this chart you want to point out, Harvey?
The two things I want to kind of point out is the Fibonacci retracement values. We've actually traded above them, and our 10-day moving average. So both of those are actually really good, technically supportive. And if we look at a little bit farther back, anything that we want to talk about there?
I'd say I really do like the close we had today. We're over that 78.6 on the longer term, and we're over the 23.6 on the shorter term. That's a better indication than we've seen in a little while.
Yeah, it has. Like we still like our market move up that we saw back in November, but we had lots of other news that went against us here.
Yeah, I do like the StatsCan report that came out today. You know, the trade might call it a large shock. I'm not sure if you and I are maybe saying it's a shock. StatsCan had their production number pegged at about 18.9 million tons. Obviously, canola growing conditions weren't the best this year, so we were expecting some kind of reduction, as well as trade was. Number we were probably looking for was an 18.5 today, and StatsCan came out with a 17.8, which I don't know if you'd agree, Harvey, seems early for them to make a large reduction. That's not their traditional behavior that they do.
It is not, and maybe you nailed it too in discussions before the call. One of the things you mentioned is that the obvious polling of this wouldn't have actually driven the numbers to be lesser than this. I think any phone calls taken by farmers, we're probably going to point to a number like this, I think.
Agreed. Yep.
Yeah.
So if we look at canola over the last, 4 years here, you can see in drought year 21, the canola crop was about 14.2 million tons. 22 and 23, we were in the high 18s, low 19. And this is a pretty big reduction here. We haven't seen a crop this small, excluding 21, obviously, in quite some time.
So it's, a 7% loss off of last year. So that's a big enough number. And we'll talk about the wheat later. It's in this chart, but when we look at this in the S&D, and again, numbers don't quite work up to the exact number that they have, but this is tight. If we were to say that crush numbers are going to be not at the 12 that I would have penciled in before this report, and even exports at 7.5, that is pretty tight number. And if some of our statements that we said earlier, if this is early walk down, this is a 15% decrease off of the Olympic 10-year average. And what does that look like? You're going to have to walk down even lower at crush and lower exports. And we've already got like over 3 million export and 3.2 as of Friday on the crush. So big numbers already coming through. So
what I always find so interesting is the big buzz right now is what is Canadian exports going to be, between the China tariffs and the US tariff. We've got exports pegged at some fairly low numbers. It's not going to be that hard to attain that kind of export number. And that's with some looming big problems out there.
So if we look at last year's number, we are almost half of it already just on the exports that we've already got. So yeah, it's hard to pinpoint what the number is. It's got to slow down. And the only way it slows down is there's got to be price rationing. And that's probably exactly what is going to get talked about probably for the next few weeks.
So here's just a real good visual of what it looks like in a bar chart of how much smaller we're looking at here.
Yeah. And if they did slow play it, and you slow play it with the 15% off the 10-year Olympic average, it's quite tight as far as production.
Yeah.
What are we looking at here?
ABARES came out with their crop production estimates this week as well. Their canola crop is a little bit smaller than last year, more or less due, I would say, to reduction in acreage, but they've got about a 5.5 million ton crop there. Exports are going to be about 4.1, which is
32% less than last year. That's a big number. That's significant when you start playing with a tightened supply on the world anyway, right?
So I find it really interesting when we look at like the big global canola producers. We've got Canada, we've got problems. USDA's got us pegged at 20 million, which we obviously know is not there. Now you've got Australia. That number's more relevant, but you can see they're a smaller player. The other really big piece of the pie that I find interesting is in the EU. They've got some production issues there as well. They had a major frost event, what was it, back in March or April, that really hurt their rapeseed.
And some of this is actually going to probably get truthed a little wee bit with next week's USDA report. This is USDA report from September, so we're going to get some updated numbers here this coming week.
Yeah. What is also interesting is not only is the EU the second biggest producer of canola, they're also a very large importer of canola. They have a massive biodiesel market. So everything they grow, they use domestically, and they still need to import on top of what they already grow. So it is going to be interesting if the two biggest global producers both have a production issue. Where are we going to get all this canola from?
Yeah, exactly. So if this number is smaller than what's posted, or going to be bigger for the import, yeah, where is it going to come from? That's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at EU rapeseed and the price run up that they've had, and a pullback on, I would say this is probably just a natural thing that markets have to do, but we're battling back to get to some of those highs that we've just recently seen. It's great.
I think that's such a great comment you made, is even if markets remain fundamentally supported, at some point you're going to see pullbacks. Things cannot stay at the top forever. They also can't stay at the bottom for forever, but it is important to remember having that discipline. Even though all the things say it should go higher, at some point things will pull back.
Yeah. So this is one that I've talked about a lot, and Janelle, she's made the sheet, and it demonstrates just the price differential between EU rapeseed and Canadian canola, priced in Canadian dollars. Now, there's a cost to get there, of course, but we have never seen these values before in the past. So it's going to bode well for our export program, and our export program is already strong. So I am not going to be a predictor of exactly how much is going to get exported, but it's going to be fairly strong just because of some of this.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Harvey, is it fair to say that normally Canadian canola is a premium over rapeseed?
It usually is, because of the market that we have that's so close to us as well, right? And ours being a good amount of it is going into human consumption, and theirs is basically going into the industrial biodiesel and industrial paints and thinners and all that other stuff that the industrial oils are going into.
Right.
Yeah. So this one, just to remind us, and maybe you've got the best kind of point here, but if we got technicals lining up and we got the fundamentals lining up, here we are is, you can say this is where we are right now in timeline in a seasonality, and you can see what generally happens going into the spring summer months. I'm not saying that it will happen, but generally it does, and a tighter supply will probably bode well for the market to actually have product getting pulled out early and a little bit of excitement coming into the spring with price.
I was going to say, I think at the end of the day, something that's maybe important to note is this could be a possibility for a good reentry point.
Yes. Yeah, we didn't mention that, but it definitely should be, especially when you look at the previous charts. What do you think about wheat?
It's definitely trying to do something here. It's trying to test this downward trend line, but I'm always so cautious with some of these things. Wheat will just break your heart over and over again, but it's definitely got some life in it right now.
Yeah, I like that it crossed this short-term trend line, but I did draw this chart to just show you where that trend line might be on the larger, longer term. It's not quite as clean as I would like to see it, as far as moving up out of this downward trend yet. But we did get news on the StatsCan.
Yeah, come out with a 35 million ton crop. Most of that is actually driven by a big increase in durum wheat. Overall, though, I don't think it's much of a surprise. We knew Canada was going to have a big wheat crop.
Yeah, and it shows up here, right?
Yep, 2% increase over last year. Durham's that big one, 44% over last year. So definitely weighing on all wheat.
Yeah. And if we look at it on the supply and demand side, and I have to correct myself on this. These are averages for the last number of years, and it's actually showing a really tight supply or ending stocks. It's not likely to get that tight, but that would mean that there's going to have to be maybe a shift in exports going to somewhere else. But when we look at these pictures, that's tight, and we got good production from Australia that's showing up.
Yeah, they had a 22% increase over last year. They had a big wheat crop.
It's not a problem, right? But when we look at globally, even if you shift the Australia number, we kind of hold fast. Europe has had some issues. Don't know what the USD is going to kind of print here, but this is a trend that's on the world wheat ending stocks that is actually, it's ripe for a move up. Can I call it out today? I am not there yet. I wish I was. I want to be, right? And on the expert sides, I think you had a pretty good point made here.
Oh, hit 3 more clicks on the slideshow. There we go.
Oh, there we are. Okay, there we got it now.
I forgot to loop that together. What's real important here to note is on the wheat side, because there's so many countries that grow wheat, who are the big exporters, who are the big ones that play in, and this is why Russia, I feel like, has such a big impact. Maybe not to the point as what farmers want it to, but Russia is a huge player in the world's wheat exports.
100%. And these numbers are going to shift around a little bit, and I'm going to say these are pretty consistent, but you got European or EU is probably a little bit off. Canada might be a little bit up, and even though Australia would be a little bit up as well on the numbers. But the world is still hungry for wheat, and if you got the Black Sea area with some tightening of supplies, because I think this is maybe our last slide, and there's a story here on problems in that area.
Yeah, and definitely even concerns about how much wheat, Russia's going to export to, because they have been record numbers. So if there's going to be some pullbacks, could it impact the market is the real question.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's all we have for you today. So we'll maybe catch up on the USDA report.
Awesome. Thanks, Harvey.
Take care.